The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everybody! Welcome to Lunch and Learn Wednesday. If you would please, could you just raise your hand and let me know that you can hear me? Yay! Okay, so we have audio, that's a good thing. I'm going to give it about 2 more minutes because I think we had a few more people coming in today. I hope everybody's good. While we're waiting, let's do a quick poll. I want to know how many of you are here for part 2. So did you come to part 1 2 weeks ago? Yes and no, yes and no, yes and no. All right, that's pretty good. So I'm going to close this out and I'll share it with you. Looks like some of you were here, some of you weren't here. That's totally fine. They can be viewed separately, not a big deal. And I'll kind of recap stuff as we go through it. And make sure I get those off your screen. There we go. So what we're going to talk about today is part 2 of kind of a 2-part series. Part 1 was, you know, kind of who, what, when, where, why. That's on our YouTube channel. This one will be up on the YouTube channel too. And what we're going to talk about today is how to pass a SOLIDWORKS test, how to pass a SOLIDWORKS certification exam. Who am I? So for those of you who weren't here, I'm Rachel Diane. I work in the Albany office. I'm tech support. And, you know, if you call in, I'm the person on the other end of the phone. And if you come into training, maybe I'm the person who trains you for whatever class you come in for. Fun fact, I love, love, love to play video games. So if you were here 2 weeks ago, Titanfall hadn't quite come out yet, but now it has been out for 8 amazing days. I am on Xbox Live. My gamer tag is I am cool girl. If you play video games, if you're on Xbox Live, hit me up. Tell me who you are. I would love to play with you. I am all over social media, Skype, Twitter, Goodreads, everything. Find me. Let me know what's going on in your certification journey. I would love to hear about it. So, like I said, 2-part series. On March 5th, this one's on the YouTube channel. We did who, what, when, where, why. We did the big stuff. So why you should get certified, what exams you can take, where you should start. So we decided that we were going to start with the Certified SOLIDWORKS Professional exam. So we went ahead and created our Proctor account and we purchased the Certified SOLIDWORKS Professional. We purchased all 3 segments and we did that using our subscription services coupons. Oops. Okay. And we also did a frequently asked questions and an audience Q&A kind of thing. What we're going to cover today is the hows. So we're going to cover what's on the test, specifically the Certified SOLIDWORKS Professional exam. We are going to talk about some SOLIDWORKS best practices, some of those essential concepts like best profile, default planes, that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about test-taking tips and tricks. So part of these exams, you remember back in high school, kind of when you took the SAT, you didn't just study for the content on the SAT. Yes, you had to learn the vocabulary words, you had to learn the content, but you also had to take some time to get to know the test itself, how the test is structured. You had to know how to 50-50, how to, you know, how long you had for each segment. So that's exactly what we're going to do with the SOLIDWORKS exams. We're going to look at the test structure itself and look at some test-taking tips and tricks. I'm going to spend 30 minutes of our lunchtime today, and I'm actually going to take a live practice test. I'm going to do a practice test I created for the segment 1 of the professional exam. And then, ooh, yay, best part. We're going to talk about the rewards that you get for getting certified, what kind of stuff you are going to see and where you can tell everybody that you were certified. And we're also going to do a full Q&A. So in your webinar taskbar, there's a section for you to put in any questions that you have. So if you have questions, if they come up while I'm talking, just go ahead and throw those in there so you don't forget, so I don't forget, and we'll do a full Q&A at the end. I'll answer everything I can. first step to these tests is you got to study. Okay, you have to prepare for them. And kind of where do you prepare, where do you start looking? You can definitely, first thing, the practice test that I'm going to take today is on our website. So if you go to our favorite websites, there's a link there for my practice exam. You can get a PDF format. You can go back and you can try this part. You can do it however you want to do it. The next website, I've been using this a lot more lately. It's my.solidworks.com. This one is kind of cool because what it does is it aggregates all those SolidWorks places that we usually go, like the forums and any blog posts you read, anything like that. And it lets you search all SolidWorks places at once. And then it's going to tell you on a different line item like, oh, okay, this one came from a blog, or this one came from the forums, or this one came from the help menus. It's a really cool thing. So if you haven't done my.solidworks.com, check that out. It's interesting. Also, you guys know it, your user groups. If you ever see a certification preparation presentation come down through your user groups, cough, cough, hint, hint, it's possible that that presenter has vouchers to give away with whatever certification category they're talking about. So if you see those presentations come through, check out your user group meeting. And last and definitely not least, and not to be underestimated, you can Google it. So I found probably 100,000 results, something crazy, a lot of results for this. And the cool thing about it is the community has really taken this over. So I have a prep exam. Every other blogger out there probably has a prep exam. I think when I was studying for my professional level, I probably found 8 unique exams that I took that somebody else had written for practice. So definitely check out everybody else's resources. It's a really cool thing. And what else we got? Okay, so more about the CSWP. Number one, this is the third iteration of it. This is the third generation of the CSWP. Once upon a time, way back in the day, this used to be an 8-hour test with a SolidWorks person standing behind you. And you're probably wondering why I just told you that. I tell you this because it's instant pep talk material. So when you take your test, I want you to think, you know, you're probably going to be a little bit stressed the first time. I want you to think to yourself, man, this is a 90-minute test, and my alternative was having Rachel stand behind me for 8 hours. Can you imagine? So I really like the time test. I really like the internet ones, at least based on the history that I've heard of how the test used to be. Next thing, SolidWorks is going to recommend that you have taken SolidWorks Essentials, and then you've worked for 6 months full-time in the software to attempt this one. Okay. The only exam to be offered in segments. So when you take your Certified SolidWorks Associate, when you take your sheet metal test, when you take your mold tools test, those are going to be sit down for a couple of hours and take your test, and they're just one hit. For the Certified SolidWorks Professional level, what they've done is they've broken this out into 3 segments, or 3 chapters, if you will. And it's one for modeling, one for configurations, one for assemblies. We're going to look at that in more detail here in a second. And what happens when you take this test, let's say you take all 3 segments. You take 1, 2, and 3. You don't have to take them all at the same time. And let's say maybe segment 2 gave you a hard time. You got hung up on configurations. When you take these segments and pass them, they're passed forever. Okay? But if you fail it, you only have to wait 2 weeks to take it again. So they kind of broke it out into pieces to help you get there more quickly. So you don't have to take the whole test over again because it was already categorized into these 3 segments or chapters, if you will. So what's on the test? Per segment, what's on the test, we're going to look at some of this stuff. And the modeling segment, I'm not really going to touch on because, like I said, I'm going to do a full 30-minute practice test. The segment 2 is configurations. So all things configurations. So we're going to do using configurations. So basically what that means is when you review somebody's part, they're going to have you go to the configurations tab and check out how they set up the properties, how many configurations are there, that kind of stuff. They're going to have you modify existing configurations and existing parts. So I really liked segment 2 because it forced me to navigate other people's stuff. And sometimes that is a skill in and of itself. It's just being able to navigate and understand and translate what other people did to create their models. The third segment, this one's 80 minutes long, and it's all things assemblies. So you're going to create assemblies, you're going to throw parts into them, mate them up, use collision detection. So if you haven't used collision detection, you need to study that. You're going to replace those components once you put some of them in there, and create new coordinate systems and do mass properties. So mass properties in an assembly is probably like center of mass, something like that. Whereas on the modeling test, when you do mass properties, they're going to ask you for weight, they're going to ask you for mass. This slide is just a kind of overview of what's on each of these segments. If you go to the SOLIDWORKS website, so we looked at this in the last part 1. There we go. We looked at this in part 1. If you actually come to the website and click on each exam, down the middle, there's a really detailed overview of what commands they will cover, kind of what they expect you to be able to do with those commands. Definitely come in here and check this out. This is where I would start studying. Make sure you're familiar with all those line items. And then they also have sample exams under each category in the quick links. Okay, so you do have some really cool resources on the SOLIDWORKS website. And what else do we have? All right, the key to success. So the key to success on these exams is, to me anyway, they're timed. They're timed tests. So you have to be fast. You have to be super fast to take these tests. And here's the thing about being fast. When you're trying to be fast, sometimes the first thing you do, right, is you kind of start to cut corners. And we have to remember that the key component of speed, the key component of fast modeling is you have to be patient and you have to do it right the first time. That's what we're after. So I'm going to teach you kind of a 4-step process, how I take my tests and how I help myself ensure that I get it right the first time. Okay. So step 1 is going to be design intent. And when I say design intent, what I'm after is I want you guys to read through the entire question set. So they're going to give you, it depends on how many questions. It could be this part alone, just reading the question set. This could take you 3, 4, 5 minutes. And the reason I want you to read through the question set is because what happens here is they're going to give you a model. They're probably going to start with something pretty simple, actually. And then they're going to mimic the design process, and they're going to complicate it over time. So when they complicate this thing, you have to kind of know where you're going. It's more important to know where you're going than where you're starting. So you remember, think back to, I don't know, like 7th grade, 6th grade maybe, whenever you did your first real science experiment, and teacher gave you a lecture about following directions and how it was super important that you read them all the way through the first time. Same concept here. So I was the kid who got this test after that follow directions lecture, and step 1 is read everything carefully. But then at step 13, I had forgotten about that, and I was bored, and I started screaming in the middle of my classroom that I was the king of the universe. And then I realized when I got to the end that all I was supposed to do was put my name on the paper and be quiet. So I don't want you to be the guy in the middle of, your office that starts screaming at SOLIDWORKS because you didn't see the curveball coming. So read through the entire question set and know what they're going to ask you at the end. Step number 2, I want you to input all possible information. So what they're going to do is they're going to give you a box, okay? And that box is going to be length times width times height. So A, B, and C are going to be your variable values. When they give you A, B, and C, I want you to use your equations folder and set up global variables for those so that all you have to do is change that box. And like I said, we're going to do a live practice test and look at that. When you input this information, the other key factors here is you need to make sure that you get your materials properties in the part file. So I showed you 2 weeks ago where I had a really hard time with the mold tools test. And when I took this test the first time, I had a hard time with imported model repair. When I took it the second time, I had a hard time with imported model repair. When I took it the third time, I knew imported model repair. I knew how to do it. My model was perfect. But I got so excited that I knew the content that I forgot my procedure and I failed to assign a materials property to my part. So no matter how good my part was, no matter how good my model was, my answer was incorrect because they asked me for mass and I had failed to assign material to it. So make sure that you input all of your variable values and you input your materials properties. And last step here, I want you to save the part equal to the question. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 5-question test, and I want you to have 5 models or 5 part files when the test is done. And the reason I want you to do this is so that you have some history of what's happened. I want you to have somewhere to go back to, because let's say you do fail a test. Now you've kind of got a study guide, and you can get to know yourself a little bit better and figure out what happened if something does go wrong. Okay? So step number 3, I want you to meditate. Okay? I want you to hang out for a minute, and I want you to really look at the part and think about its best profile and those default planes. I want you to think about how you're going to draw this thing up, and I want you to think about where you're going to start drawing it. So essential concepts, these are these best profile and default plane kind of stuff. And these are 2 examples of that. So on the gold part on the right-hand side, this one is an example of best profile where the first feature that you create extrudes the most amount of material. So here's the thing about best profile. The only way you can find it is to walk around the part. You have to look at all 6 sides of a part to find out which sketch is probably the best one for you to start with. So in this gold example, if I were under a time crunch and I just looked at this thing first look, I might have started with 2 cylinders and varied the height, and then maybe did like a mid-plane extrusion for that triangle shape in the middle, tried to mirror those cuts. I mean, I could have made it really complicated very quickly. Whereas if I had just taken 30 seconds and looked at all 6 sides of the box, I could have found that one, started on the top plane, and just extruded up. And the other cool thing about that sketch is I could probably put quite a few of my variable values in there. I would assume that maybe they're going to change the fillet. I would assume that maybe they're going to change the size of those cylinders. And I could put all of that information in one sketch. Okay? So the purple part, another example of best profile and that design intent. So the variable for that bracket is probably going to be that angle. It's going to be critical to our design intent. So when they give you that kind of information, make sure you find the sketch where it's easiest to control those things. So in this case, you could put the purple sketch in there, put your angle value in, and make it equal to A or B or C, whatever the variable is there. And it's much easier to control in the sketch than it would be to create a reference plane and, you know, try to do all that. So make sure you walk around all 6 sides of the part and try to find your best possible profile to start with. And the second part of this is your default planes. When you put this thing on paper, when you put it in SOLIDWORKS, I don't want you to waste any time in translation. So if they give you an isometric view, make sure you match it. So for this gold one, start on the top plane. For this purple one, start on the front plane. And make sure that you are literally just copying the information they give you so that you don't lose time trying to translate your front sketch to their top sketch or vice versa, anything like that. Okay, just copy the information they give you. It'll save you time later on. And finally, 10 minutes into the test, you can begin construction of your model. Okay? And when you construct your model, I want you to extrude everything you can first. Extrude, 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 extrude all of these solid material that you can. Once that's all created, start making your cuts, start removing stuff, So cut, 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 maybe use your hole wizard tool if you need to. And then, once all that's done, fillets, chamfers, that kind of stuff. Add your applied features at the end of the tree. Okay? And like I said, we're gonna look at this stuff in pretty great detail here for about 30 minutes. And the next thing, these are some examples. So these are pictures of past tests. So the CSWA is on the left, the Certified SOLIDWORKS Expert. This is one of the models off that test, the CSWP Segment 1 that we're about to look at. And the reason I show you these is because when I bring up my practice test, some of you are going to kind of look at it funny and say, man, that's a really easy practice test. And you know, that's probably true. My model is not complicated. But I didn't want my model to be complicated. What I want you to get out of the next 30 minutes isn't how to be the best, most complicated model maker ever. I want you to get the test down. I want you to see how the process that I've set up is going to help you be successful at the test taking part of this. So for every test you take, your sheet metal test, your mold tools test, your Certified SOLIDWORKS Professional, for every test you take, you're going to have to hone that particular skill set. So you're going to have to study for sheet metal, you're going to have to study for weldments. But the test is always the same. So the proctor is going to look the same. The process to taking the test is always going to be the same. So that's what I want to show you today with this practice test we're about to take. And so I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. Where are you? There you are. I'm going to bring up SOLIDWORKS. Okay. So the place we're at in time right now is we have gone ahead and purchased our CSWP. We did that with our subscription services voucher, and we've logged into our proctor, and we've gone ahead and chosen that test to start and hit the play button. When you do that, you're going to get a welcome screen. So welcome to your test. Here's some information about it. Your exam is 5 questions. You can answer them in any order you prefer. Once you click End Test, you can't go back. I think that's awesome. And the way this one is structured is it's 5 questions, 20 points apiece, and we need to get 4 out of 5 correct in 30 minutes to pass. The reason I structured this test this way is because that's how every single practice test I found online was structured. So whenever you're looking at these practice exams, they're all pretty much going to be built the same way, 4 out of 5 in 30 minutes or less. Okay. The other part of this is I have a timer, and we are going to time this, make sure that we're good to go. And so 30 minutes on the clock, we're going to go ahead and start this thing up and see how we do. We're going to start that. And first rule, read through the question set, see where you're at. So we're going to start the test, and we're going to look at the questions. So when the proctor comes up, it's going to be a couple of different pieces. First piece is this text box on the left-hand side. That's going to give you your instructions. So it says, build this part in SOLIDWORKS. Here's your unit system. Here's how many decimal places. So we're going to do millimeters to 2 decimal places. It's going to tell me that my part origin doesn't matter where I put it. If they tell you where to put the origin, please make sure you do that. It's important. Okay? For our material, we're going to do 60-61. Don't forget about material. It's a big deal. Okay? All holes are through unless shown otherwise. And then they're going to say use the following parameters and equations which correspond to the dimensions labeled in the images. So here's the values for A, B, C, and D. Okay? And if we look through our image box over here, so we have this graphics preview, they're going to give us those front, right, top views of the part that we need. So here's A, B is going to be the width over here, C is going to be this step down, X and Y are going to relate to our cylinder. Okay? And then if we scroll down some more and finish out our instructions, you see X and Y are actually going to be equations. And then the question is going to be, what is the mass of the part in grams? They're going to give you a multiple choice answer. And the reason they give you multiple choice here is because they want to make sure that you have built the part correctly before they move on. And the reason for this is the next question is going to be progressive. We're going to build upon your first model. So when you go to the next question, What? It's the same model. Yes, absolutely, it's the same model. So when you click through the images, it's going to be the same model is the first question. And the only thing that's going to have changed is over here in your instructions, they're going to change those variable values. So A went from 172 to 170. Okay, they're just going to change the values for A, B, C. For question number 3, you won't believe it, it's the same model again. All they're going to do is update those variable values. Okay? So same model, questions 1, 2, and 3. Questions 4 and 5 is where it gets fun. This is where it gets interesting. So for question 4, this is where they start mimicking that design intent, or that design process, excuse me. So what the instructions here are going to be modify the part using the following dimensions. They're going to give you some detail views of where they made these changes. And then they're going to give you new variable values. And this is not a reading comprehension test, okay? So whenever they change something about these drawing views, they're going to make sure they tell you. So in this case, hey, by the way, the equation for y has changed. They're going to make sure they tell you that. And the question, again, is going to be measure the part after you make all these changes. What is the weight in grams? Okay. And then question 5, another multiple choice question. So that lets you know that question 5 is going to build upon it. And question 5 is going to be fill in the blank. Same part as question 4. And we're just going to make those variable changes and move on. When you read through your question set, it is super important that you take a look at the summary screen. So the summary screen, in this case, is just an image. Obviously, we haven't answered any of the questions yet. But how this works is going to show you a state. So is it answered or unanswered? And more importantly, it's going to show you how the questions are weighted. So if you have a 5-point question and several 30-point questions, take the heavier questions first. Start with those models. And the reason being is you want to set yourself up for success. If you waste too much time on those 5-minute questions, then you don't have time to finish the 30-minute questions. So start with the heavier weighted portions of the test, and we're going to go back to question number 1, and we're going to start the rest of our process. So step 1 was read through the question set. We did that. It took us 4 minutes. Step 2 is going to be to create our part and then input all of that variable information they give us. So we've started our part. Where do we put that variable info? So what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of scroll this back up and look at my variables. And under my equations folder, I'm going to right-click. And I'm going to say Manage Equations. And this is where I'm going to set up those variables. So A is going to be 172. B is going to be 77. C is going to be 104. D 62. I'm just using the tab key on my keyboard, by the way. So F, I can't put in here. I can't put the variable for F in here because it's a whole wizard hole. But I can input X and Y. So X is going to be B times 125. And Y is going to be B times 1.5 minus 50. Okay. And if we remember right, that equation for y changed at question 4, right? They told us. They put a note there. So if you're really paying attention, if you're really on the ball here, you can say this changes at question 4. Just kind of give yourself a reminder. We're going to say OK. So we've read through the question set. We have input all of our variable information. We need to apply a material. So it was 6061, if I remember right. I'm going to come back to my proctor, kind of move around there. 6061 happens to be in my favorites. So I'm going to assign that and save the part. So that's the last step of the input process. I'm going to save this as, I went ahead and set up a folder before I started taking my test. You can absolutely do that so you have a place to save all this stuff. I'm going to save this as question 1. Okay. And now I'm going to talk about best profile. Where should I start? I'm going to start with the cylinder. I feel like that's the easiest way to do it. They gave me an isometric view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that isometric view. So I'm going to start on the front plane with my cylinder, start a sketch. I'm going to use my mouse gestures for this, guys, so I'm going to right-click, drag, and start my circle. And I'm going to make this cylinder, the outside is equal to that variable of x that we created. Say OK. And now I'm going to go ahead and extrude this up. I have to go back to the proctor, and I have to figure out how tall that cylinder was. So that cylinder was equal to that variable of d. We're going to say OK. And when we're constructing things, all of our solid material first, right? So I'm going to start another sketch back here. Draw what you want. Make sure you relate it, and then put your dimensions on it. So I'm going to make this midpoint, make sure that it's symmetrical. And then I'm going to put my dimensions on it. This is going to be A, so equal to A. And then if I move this over, this is going to be equal to B. Okay, we're going to extrude that up. I don't remember how tall it was, so I got to go back to my proctor, check that out. So that's how this works. You're going to be back and forth between SOLIDWORKS and your proctor. Okay, and now we have all of our solid material that we need. So it's time to start making those cuts. Again, I'm going to start with the easy cuts. I'm going to start with the cuts on this cylinder. So I'm going to start a sketch here. All cuts are through unless otherwise specified. So I'm just going to draw my circle in here. I'm going to make this equal to Y. Okay, come to my Features tab, do a Cut Extrude. We're going to push this all the way through and say OK. And the fun cut here on this test is this half moon. How do you create this half moon? So one of my favorite buttons in the Property Manager allows you to keep the material within the sketch instead of cut it away. So when I start this sketch, what I can do is I can actually just use that rectangle in the middle, the one they give me that 32 value for. I'm going to make this tangent. So draw what you want, make sure you relate it, and then put your dimensions on it. This is going to be 32. So I have a fully defined sketch, and when I go to cut it out, what happens when I cut this out of here, right, it cuts away the box, but there's a checkbox here to flip and cut outside of the box. So I need to know how deep this is going to go. This is going to go equal to E, and I can cut everything outside the sketch instead of inside of it. It's going to save me a lot of time making kind of a hard sketch. Okay? So remember that you can sketch what you want to keep instead of what you want to cut away, and just turn on that checkbox. The next cut we need to make is going to be this ledge. So I'm going to start a sketch here. Use my rectangle tool again. I really like my rectangle tool. Draw what you want, relate it, put your dimensions on it. So this is going to be equal to C. And then this is going to be 43. Come back to the proctor. We need to figure out how deep this cut is. So it looks like it's 6 millimeters. We're going to extrude a cut. Make it 6. Say OK. Not too bad, right? So that's how this works, back and forth between the proctor and SOLIDWORKS. The next thing we need to do is maybe put our hole wizard holes in here. So again, that was a variable we couldn't input, so we're going to start our hole wizard tool. We're going to scroll down a little bit. It's going to be a counter bore for a hex bolt, an M12 close fit with some custom sizing. So we have our counter bore option, our hex bolt option, and M12. We're going to do a close fit with some custom sizing here. So all they want to know is that you know that you can turn on that checkbox. We're going to go through all and then put our sketches here. Okay, I'm going to go normal 2 because it's easier to grab stuff when you're in 2D if you're normal 2. I'm going to make these horizontal, draw what you want, relate it, and then put dimensions on it. and we're going to go 20. I don't remember what the other one was. 20, 50. Okay, our sketch is fully defined, so we can exit out of here, say yes. And now all we need is fillets and chamfers. So the fillets are 12 millimeters here. We're going to go constant. We're going to make that 12. And guys, we're almost halfway through our test, and that's to be expected because we need to create a good first model to move on. Okay, so we're going to say yes to the fillet. We're going to go ahead and throw this chamfer on here. It's going to be 12 by 45. I'm going to pick my edge. I'm going to say yes. Okay, I'm going to save my part, and I'm going to go to evaluate and do mass properties. And it's 162862. So that tells me that I'm right on, and that's where I should be. So if you don't get the exact result for the multiple choice questions, you need to go back and reevaluate. You need to be dead on, because remember the next two questions are progressive. So I'm going to choose my answer here, excuse me, and I'm going to go to the next question. Save a part per question, so we're going to use that awesome new Save as Copy and Open feature. We're going to save this as question 2 and say OK. And now, to make our changes to question 2, it's as simple as right-clicking equations, and because we spent all of that time creating a solid part, we gave ourselves a good foundation, we built a good editable model. All we have to do is come in here and change these values and move on with our day. Okay? So this one's going to be 5. My equations haven't changed yet. They don't change until question 4. We're going to say OK. Our model's going to update, and we're going to do mass properties. Don't come over here and type this in here. If you miss something, make sure you miss it for real. Don't fat finger something and miss it. So copy that out of there and paste it in. Go next question. So you see how fast we're getting all that time back. So same thing for question 3. We're going to save as a copy, and we're going to open up question 3, do the same thing, edit our variables, get our new mass, and go to question 4. So I'm going to say manage equations. I'm going to type this in here. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not a good type and talker. One thing at a time. It's going to be 62, and we're looking at 8 here. I'm using the tab key on my keyboard, and if I over tab, I'm just holding shift down and hitting tab again to get back to where I was. And for question 3, we're going to do mass properties. Again, copy this out of here. Don't fat finger it. Make sure if you miss it, you really missed it. And then we're going to go next question. So for question 4, we're going to save as a copy. We're going to open question 4 up, and it's time to start making those changes. So we're halfway through our test, so we only have a few minutes to get this thing modified and move on. Okay? So when you get to this point, sometimes it's kind of scary because you're like, man, I burned half of my time already. What you need to do is remember to find, that order in the chaos. When you start editing this thing, don't just start clicking at stuff. Make sure you roll the tree back and edit it properly so that it will update for question 5 the same way we had such success with questions 2 and 3. So I'm going to use my rollback bar. And for those construction rules, it was add all of your material, then cut away, then do fillets and chamfers, right? So we need to add new material. We need to add these wings, and we need to add this step. So that's exactly where I'm going to start. I'm going to roll back to my last material addition. I'm going to start adding stuff. Maybe use my normal 2 key again so I get the exact same view they have. Don't waste time getting lost in translation. Just copy exactly what they give you. Okay. So when you're sketching, sketch what you want. Relate it up. We're going to make these horizontal and put our dimensions on it. It's going to be 60, and this little point here is going to be 20. my sketch is fully defined, so I can extrude this up. I don't remember how far it's going to come up, so I got to go to my different view here. It's going to be 22. I'll flip it back in, say OK. So we've added that material. So the next set of material we need to add are the wings. So it looks like 175 center to center on kind of a 45-degree angle. That's kind of hard to draw. That's going to kind of overwhelm you at first. So make sure you break everything down into its simplest forms, its simplest pieces. So a slot is just a rectangle with 2 circles on the end, right? And then in this case, make sure you again, use the information they give you exactly the way they give it to you. So I'm going to start on the top plane, make sure I match the view they give me. I'm going to start a rectangle. I'm going to use my A key on my keyboard, kind of draw that shape out. If they give you construction geometry or if they give you information like that, make sure you go ahead and draw it in because it probably serves a purpose. They usually don't just put extra material or extra stuff in the sketches that they give you. Okay, put your dimensions on here. It's going to be 28. Oop, must have had something picked. There we go. For some reason, I just missed that line a couple times. That happens. It's going to be 28. This one is going to be 35. Okay. And what happens here is I'm missing a couple of dimensions. They're going to give you a width dimension as a full round on every test I've taken, I think. And I think they kind of do this to mess with you. So the width of this rectangle is going to be 7.5. It's going to be this radius, right? So just make sure you're looking for that. If you know that there's a dimension that you're missing, check it on a full round. It's got to be somewhere. And then we're still underdefined. So what happens to a lot of the time on these tests is they kind of infer something. Okay, they suggest something. So in this case, what they're suggesting is that the middle of this rectangle is coincident with the middle of that cylinder. Okay, so make sure you get the inferred kind of stuff. Make sure that your sketches are fully defined before you move on. That's really important. And they probably gave you all the information that you needed to fully define it. Just remember that. It's there somewhere. Okay, so I'm going to extrude this out. Use my mid-plane end condition. Make sure that I stay symmetrical. And the other part of this here too is my first instinct now might have been to open up my fillet tool and use the full round tool. I don't know if you guys have used that at all. And you got to be really conscious of how they give you the information. So if I come in here and I use my full round tool, I really like this one a lot. If you haven't seen it, what you do is you pick the 3 sides that you want to round. Okay? And SOLIDWORKS will go ahead and do that. But what happens here is it removes material. So if that's your first instinct, that's fine. But in this case, they actually give us the 175 center to center. So this method would only work if it was, max to max. So make sure that you really take a detailed look at their dimensions, and the correct way or the faster way to do it here would just be to, again, break it down into really basic shapes and put the circles on the end of these rectangles. Okay? And that'll give us the proper dimension that they asked for, that kind of thing. So I'm going to make these tangent. Okay. And then when you extrude stuff, if you extrude and double click on a surface, it's going to take you, it's going to take you up to surface. Okay. So we've added all the material that we need. We're going to use that rollback bar again, and we're going to start just kind of looking at our next set of features. Okay, we have 8 minutes left, so it's getting kind of stressful. But here's the cool part. That hole, same hole. It's still equal to X. The next one, our half moon, awesome. It's the same half moon. Our step, all right, things are starting to change here. So instead of having just the plain old step that we had before, what they've done is they've actually put a little recess in here. Maybe there's a lid or something that's going on it. And they've done this radius of 12, but they've offset it by 5 millimeters. So what this means to me is I need that radius right now. I need to offset it. So I'm going to roll down my tree. I'm going to pull my fillet up to where I need it, where I'm working, and then roll my tree back up. So make sure, again, that you're really focusing on those basic best practices kind of stuff. Now I can start my sketch. I can offset. I can go 5 millimeters to the inside. Here's another fun trick for you. So when you offset stuff, I actually need this line to be collinear to that edge. So if I delete that offset relationship, I can drag this now. It turns blue again, and I can go ahead and create that collinear relationship that I need. Okay. I can extrude a cut. The double click up to surface also works on the cuts, works for everything. It's a good shortcut. So we have the step that we need. We have that little recess that they put in here. If we keep rolling down, all right, so our counter bores are no good anymore. They actually changed that to a slot, right? So instead of deleting the counter bore, make sure you suppress it. You might need that information later on. Okay, maybe that's just part of your history, how you built this thing. Maybe that's where you need to reevaluate your skill set if something goes wrong. I'm not saying something will, but if it does. So we go ahead and suppress that. We're going to create a slot. In your property manager for the slot tool, there's this really awesome add dimensions checkbox, and I feel like it's undervalued. Make sure you go ahead and add dimensions when you drop this thing on here. It'll save you some clicking. Okay, relate it. We're going to make these coincident, and this is going to be 50. I'm going to just double click and update those dimensions that it put on there for me. This one's going to be 20, and we're also going to do 20 from the end. Okay, we're going to extrude a cut. We're going to go through all because all of our holes, everything was through all unless otherwise specified. We're going to say OK. And here's why the rollback method is king. Okay, what's going to happen now when I roll to my chamfer? We're going to get a visual clue, number one, that the changes that we made actually didn't propagate. So what happened here is this chamfer didn't push the same way it pushed on the original edge. So you get a visual clue that something is wrong there. And that's going to force you to go back and review that chamfer just to make sure. And whenever they change something that's not variable in the sketches, they're going to circle it. They're going to say, hey, by the way, we changed this too. Okay, so in this case, we need to actually change this to 10 millimeters and grab that other edge. So we're going to say OK. And our part is complete. Okay, not bad. So we can do evaluate and we can do mass properties. We still got 4.5 minutes. We're good. 207802. All right, this is where you're going to panic. This is where you're going to freak out. This is where I freak out every time. Don't forget about the order and the chaos. Okay, so that 4-step process was to read through the questions. We did that. When we get to the model, though, we have to input our information. So I got so excited when I started modeling question 4 that I just immediately jumped into changes. I failed to input the new variable values. So make sure that you input every time. Okay, so I'm going to manage my equations. I'm going to go ahead and change this information to what it needs to be. Okay. Race against the clock here, see if I can type fast enough. 121 and 60 and 5. And then, oh yeah, that equation for y changed at question 4. Okay, so this is going to kind of force you to review stuff a little bit, and that's a good thing. That's what you need. So we're going to say, okay, our part model is going to rebuild. Ooh, we're getting really short on time and it's getting really uncomfortable. Let's hope this works, right? So mass properties, 24, 34, 87, perfect. Okay, so make sure you're dead on these multiple choice questions because remember that question 5 is progressive. So we're going to say question 5, we're going to file, save as a copy, Don't get sloppy. Don't start cutting corners and just make the changes here. Go ahead and create question 5. Okay. I think I hit the wrong dialogue or the wrong radio button. That's okay. Got my filters turned on. I'm going to go ahead and open up question 5. Like I said, don't panic. Just make sure that you go back to the same part. Make sure you're checking your feature tree. Make sure all that stuff's there. And for question 5, we're going to go ahead and modify our variables again. This one's going to be 174 and 82. 114. 64. And 10. Okay, I'm going to say okay. And I'm going to do some evaluate mass properties. I'm going to grab this. Remember, don't fat finger it. Just copy it out of here, paste it in. That way, if you missed it, you really missed it. Okay? Don't worry about mistyping something. That's no fun ever. And when you get to this point, you can finish you can go to the next question. Okay? The next question at the end of the test is always going to be that summary screen. Evaluate, make sure everything is answered. This is that point where, okay, we've got about 90 seconds left on our test. Maybe we can go ahead and take a look at those 5-point questions. Maybe we hadn't gotten there yet. Make sure the state of all of the questions you approached is answered and that you're ready to really end the test. And when you end the test, you get a screenshot of how well you did. In this case, we got all of them right. Yay! Okay. And you can share the screenshot on social media. You can, whatever you want to do with it. Tell everybody. Run around the office and tell everybody. So what happened to me and what happens to me is I tweet these things out when I get them. And the coolest thing happens. SOLIDWORKS responds. Okay? The SOLIDWORKS people, the big dogs at SOLIDWORKS, respond to me and say, hey, that's awesome. Or they want to know how the test went. And I think that's really cool that they're paying attention to this kind of stuff. So like I said, make sure you tell everybody. And when you pass, okay, because you're going to, oh, let me kill that stopwatch. That's kind of, there we go. Okay, so again, you're going to get, let's go back up here. Sorry. So you're going to pass the test. That's going to happen. And when you pass, like I said, tell everybody, scream it at the mountaintops, whatever you got to do. For your rewards, like I said, you're going to be the best user you ever have been after you study for these things and pursue them. That's what happened to me. I got 1,000 times better. And you're going to get your logos. So you're also going to get logos. You're going to get your QR codes. You're going to get these pretty certificates to hang on your wall. You're going to get listed in the certification center. You can do all these things. So like I said, don't forget about your wall of awesomeness. Okay, these certificates are templated really nice. They all match. They go up on the wall together. It's fantastic. Okay, so tell everybody. And I challenge. I like challenges. Okay, so I want you guys to take your Certified SOLIDWORKS Professional before June 1st. Okay, and 2 weeks ago we talked about your vouchers a little bit. On June 1st, those coupons roll over, okay? So I want you to make sure that you are ready for the next set of coupons. Okay, so take your professional exam and do that. It'll be awesome. If you have questions, if you have comments, whatever, make sure you get in touch with me, get in touch with somebody who's already certified, that kind of thing. And some announcements. CADimensions has a blog. What? Okay, so this is new and I'm really excited about it. Make sure you check out our new blog. We're putting as much information up there as we can. It's CADimensions.com/blog. It's going to be a fun thing. You're going to hear from kind of everybody at CADimensions. So it's really cool and it's out there now. Make sure you subscribe. Another announcement for you guys, CADimensions has a morning show. What? Yes, we have this morning show thing we've been doing. It's once a Friday. It's once a month on a Friday, and this Friday is going to be Tom DeLora and Jeff Lewis. They're going to talk all things 3D printing, so make sure you check that out. It's between 8 and 9 o'clock. It's a really cool thing, and here's my contact info. So any questions, thoughts, comments, anything that you have or want to share with me about certification, please do. Email me, tweet me, LinkedIn me. If you want to play Xbox, I am cool girl, okay? Anything like that. CADimensions.com is our main website. That's where you're going to find the practice test that we just looked at. Check out the blog, subscribe. The YouTube channel has part 1 of this series. It's already up. This will be up today or tomorrow. Part 2 will be up today or tomorrow. And I'm going to look at questions here and see if we have any questions. If any questions came up, make sure that you put them in here. And let's see. When modeling, do you usually avoid creating any fillets or rounds within your sketches? I do. And the reason I do is because I feel like they're easier to edit as their own feature. And the other part of this too is when you get into big assembly kind of stuff, fillets and champers, those kinds of things, we typically don't need them to assemble, right? They're just pretty. So we turn them off to kind of save us performance. And if they're built within those sketches, it's a lot harder to turn them off. So I do. Usually when I put it in a sketch, that means it's something that I don't want to change, so I'm kind of burying it and hiding it from myself so I can't change it. Let's see what else we have. Can you copy and paste the equations, or do you have to retype them into your model? Yeah, I'm sure you can copy and paste it. I type them. Okay. That's actually probably a better, now that I think about that for a second, yeah, you probably want to copy and paste them so that you don't make those fat finger mistakes I was talking about. Good call, Andy. What else? Anybody else have any questions? Let's see if we got any more coming on here. Doesn't look like it. Okay, so like I said, email me, tweet me, whatever you got to do. If you have any questions on your certifications, I am here and happy to help. Go to your user group, find a mentor, ask that person, and have a fantastic Wednesday. Thanks for coming, guys.